Welcome to another very special episode of the Not Another Yoga Class podcast and LinkedIn Live series. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Debbie Waite, leadership coach. Hello, Debbie.
Hello. Hi. Great to be here.
Lovely to chat to you. You're in Kent. Kent, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Fabulous. So today, we're going to talk about pregnancy. This is a subject that I've really wanted to talk about, but not something that I've experienced personally. And so I need you to kind of come in and talk about some of the, negative consequences that can come from working through pregnancy. And so very briefly, could you give us a bit of an intro as to who you are? And then we'll talk about your kind of backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So like I said, Debbie Waite, I'm a leadership coach and a speaker, and I'm the founder of Stronger Inside and Out. And I'm really on a mission to give leaders their life back, because I think that we are so focused on external expectation and gratification that many leaders only focus on work. And I get them to rejig that and focus on their life and their health and their relationships as much as they do their work. So it's basically putting humanity back into the boardroom and back into leadership and back into teams and back into life.
Amazing. Can you give us a little bit of context around that period where you got pregnant, this conversation that we're having today, what you were doing, where you were working, those kind of things?
Yeah, sure. So it was my second pregnancy that had the biggest impact on me. So after my first pregnancy, I had a beautiful girl, went back full time to work, but over 4 days. I was working for a big global brand in their leadership development, their talent management department. So I was heading up a team, really focused on finding the diamonds in the rough in the company and helping the leadership teams to identify those people and develop them to be the future leaders of the company. Absolutely loved the job. And I was looking back, it's really obvious I used to be a workaholic, because I had a point to prove. And that just grew during my first pregnancy of, I'm not going to let, a baby ruin my career. I'm still going to be on the trajectory of being brilliant, being in the talent pools, running the company one day, et cetera, et cetera. Just because I've got a baby, it's not going to stop me doing that. And as much as I absolutely adored my little girl and I loved being a mum, I couldn't wait to get back to work, if I'm honest. It's hard. It's hard being a mum because you don't get any praise. And as shallow as that sounds, you don't get a thank you. You're absolutely exhausted. You're trying your hardest. Nobody says thank you. All you get is screamed at or shat on, and really difficult. And for somebody who has always been a high achiever and has always, been in a job aiming for the next promotion, aiming to get the next award, next bonus, all of a sudden you become a mum. And you're supposed to get all of that all of a sudden internally. And, looking back, it's really obvious what was going on for me. But at the time, I put her into nursery, I dropped her off at, 6:30, 7 in the morning. I mean, that actually makes me feel physically sick now. And picked her up at 6 o'clock at night, carried on, and got pregnant with my second child. And it was a very different pregnancy. Of course it was a different pregnancy. Of course it was. I already had a toddler running around. I was working full time. I was commuting up to the city of London every day. And it meant that I was exhausted, essentially. I was exhausted from trying to do it all, trying to keep up with the person I used to be, trying to prove to the world and prove to anyone around me, and to try and fly the flag for women. because we've always been told that we can do it all, and we can have kids, and we can still have the career, and we can do this, that, and the other. And if you get told you can, then you should. And so I got really ill, essentially, to cut a long story short. During my second pregnancy, mentally, I wasn't where I used to be. All of a sudden, you know, positive, go lucky, energetic Debs became negative Nancy. Sorry for any Nancys out there. You know, anyone who would listen, I would say how tired I was, or how stressed I was, or I would moan about the workload, or I'd moan about my boss, or I'd moan about something else. And so it all just got to a point where it was hard work. And of course, that affected me physically as well. I became very anemic. The doctors couldn't get my iron levels up. And, you know, pregnancy is exhausting anyway, let alone trying to get through anemia as well. And it ended up, I had to get signed off from work. And to me, that was the ultimate failure.
At what point in the pregnancy were you signed off?
It was quite late. It would have been, I'm just trying to think, it wasn't that, it was probably 3/4 of the way through. So I was big, I mean, I was massive. Everyone thought I was having triplets. They ignored the twins. I was massive as well. Just the bump was huge. And yeah, it got to a point I just couldn't, I couldn't function mentally, physically, emotionally. I just couldn't function anymore. And the doctor was saying, no, that's it now, you're done, we're signing you off. And as much as I thought of I didn't want to get signed off because I was a capable, strong, independent career woman, you know, and now how ridiculous that I was fighting to not get signed off from work so that I could carry on working, even though it was having a detrimental effect to myself and my baby.
Do you, I mean, this is all very reflective now. I want to kind of get into the mind of Debbie when she was going through this. If somebody had tried to intervene, maybe kind of halfway through the pregnancy and say, hey, Debbie, look, maybe it is time to slow down. How do you think that person would have responded?
I think I would have been insulted. I think I would have been embarrassed, and I think I would have found it even more of a failure of, you know, you're failing because you can't do it. On the other hand, if somebody had from the beginning created a really safe environment for me to be able to be vulnerable and to be able to share that I was struggling. I mean, at the time, I didn't know I was struggling as much as I do now, like you say. So going back, I think that having somebody that could have asked me the right questions at the right time in a safe environment, I think could have saved me.
Okay. And what action do you think you would have taken if you'd been in that environment?
I think I would have slowed down. Yeah. I think I would have given myself, or I don't know if I would have given myself permission. I think that I needed somebody else to give me the permission to slow down and to take some things off me.
See, this is fascinating because I went through a very similar mindset when I was struggling with depression on and off for about a decade. And it took my friend to give me permission to speak to a therapist before I actually would. And it was really strange. And I've really struggled to explain that to people. So to hear you say it is quite nice and refreshing because I understand. I totally understand that.
Yeah. Because you have armor on, don't you?
Yeah.
You have armor. You don't know it. You have no idea that armor is on and it's so thick and it's so rigid. but at the same time, you haven't got any mental clarity. So you need somebody else to tell you. You can't do that yourself, because you're not in that, you're not in a position to do it. So yeah, for somebody else to take some charge and go, no, you're not doing that. You know, not because we know you can do it, but actually somebody else is doing that. And what we really need from you now is this, this, and this, rather than that, and that.
Yeah.
And to make it look like it's a normal thing, rather than they're taking it off you because you can't cope.
So this theme of providing an environment where you feel comfortable explaining what you need, and being able to speak to someone who you can maybe figure out by bouncing, by having a conversation with them, exactly what you need, has come up in pretty much every conversation I've had related to every obstacle that people face, whether it's something related to neurodiversity or menopause or whatever. So in this case of pregnancy, what advice would you give to a manager that has someone in their team that is pregnant, and they are noticing that they're potentially going through some of the things that you experienced, where they're still pushing as hard as they were pre-pregnancy, but maybe you can start to notice some of the signs and symptoms that they shouldn't be? How would you approach that situation?
In talking to the manager?
Yeah, I mean, both things. I would say creating an environment, and how would you address that conversation?
Yeah, great question. So I think this goes for everybody. I think, and this goes to exactly what, you know, you and I are all about, which is about humanity and about treating people as individual, unique, and incredible humans. And, you know, like we've just said here, this it's the same whether it's depression or whether it's pregnancy. That person has something going on that they might not even be aware of, and therefore for a manager, it's about treating that person who is in front of you with what you have, and not following a rule book, because I think actually most managers, most human managers, are petrified. They're scared of getting it wrong. They're scared of having that conversation. You know, and particularly when it comes to women, you know, particularly if it comes to a male boss with a female pregnant, you know, woman, then how can they be asking me about pregnancy? How can they be asking me about, you know, stress? How can they be asking me about my mindset? Because they're so worried about offending me that they just don't have that conversation, because they prefer not to have it than to do it wrong. And so I think with the managers, it's about helping them to take away the hierarchy, and how would they act if that was their friend? This isn't about performance management. This isn't about putting somebody in a box, ticking your sheet of she's pregnant, therefore you need to tick that box, you need to do the health and safety thing, you need to have that conversation, you need to shove that form in her face. This is about sitting down, how you doing? And that, I think that overall is the bit that is missing in most organizations, big, small, global, you know, local, is having those conversations as humans. And if we did that, they would actually be more productive and more loyal and more efficient. And so it doesn't take time out the diary, it puts time in.
Yeah. Acting with a little bit of empathy and a little bit of respect goes a hell of a long way. Potentially, if you're in a position of where you do feel uncomfortable having that conversation, would you recommend that manager finds someone within the organization that person would feel comfortable having a conversation with?
Yeah, definitely. Find somebody, and it doesn't have to be in the organization.
Yeah.
You know, I've gone into organizations as an external consultant and had those conversations because they realized, they were astute enough to realize that they weren't capable of doing it. And so whilst I was helping them to be able to have conversations in the future, actually that poor person over there is still struggling. So let's just get in and do a two-pronged approach of, I'll deal with that person, I'll help you to develop you, and then the next person, maybe we'll do it together. And it's the people who are switched on enough and self-aware enough to go, do you know what? I feel a bit icky about this conversation.
Yeah.
Or I'm just not sure of how to structure it, or what happens if this happens. They're the people that we need to grab hold of and help, because it's the people who don't know what they don't know yet that is harder to help. So let's focus on the people who know that they need to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think education goes a long way. That's the kind of secondary goal of this series, is to just provide a bit of education on the things that people are struggling with. I've learned so much, right? So if you are a manager who knows absolutely nothing about pregnancy, like me, I don't have any kids. I've seen my sister go through it, but from the benches, I didn't see what she went through in the early stages. I didn't see what she went through in the late stages. I don't really know how it can go wrong, how it can manifest, how it relates to burnout. So actually being the sort of manager that goes, I'm going to find out a little bit about menopause. I'm going to find out more about neurodiversity. I'm going to find out a little bit more so that I'm better equipped to be able to have those conversations. What sort of educational sources do you think you should, as a manager, could pursue in regards to pregnancy? Is there anything out there?
I think it would be there's books, there's resources, etc. But like anything, everybody goes through it differently. And so the biggest thing that I would say is, don't shy off from having that conversation. If somebody could sit down, using my example, if somebody could sit down with me and say, look, Debbie, you are at the most precious time of your life, and acknowledge that we don't celebrate women and pregnancy and motherhood. People are always just, I'm just a mum. Oh my gosh, you are not just a mum. You are doing the most important role in the entire planet. You are bringing new life into this world, and you are teaching them how to be human. Actually, we need to celebrate that more. But I think that if somebody could sit down with somebody and go, look, exactly what you just said, I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I'm never going to. I'm a man, or I'm a woman and I've never been pregnant, and so I cannot be in your position because I can't. But I'm really keen to support you with this, and I'm really keen to say the right things. And actually, I'm a bit scared of saying the wrong things. So can we work together on this? If I offend you in any way, I'm really sorry, but can you please tell me, and I'll know that it's coming from love, and I'm going to make mistakes. But similarly, I want to be able to help you, so let me know how I can, and to show that level of vulnerability from both sides. For the manager to say, look, I'll happily go and read a book, but that book isn't going to be about you as an individual person. So how about we just sit down and have an open conversation? And I think that there's not enough of that going on.
That's a phenomenal script that I almost want to take out and just put an option under pregnancy and just change it for pretty much anything that someone could be going through. It's kind of perfect. Debbie, just to finish off this conversation, could you just tell us where people can find you?
Absolutely. So I normally hang out on LinkedIn. That's my place. I'm on Instagram and Facebook a little bit, under Stronger Inside and Out. My website's www.strongerinsideandout.co.uk or .com. And I'm on stages quite a lot, traveling around the country, talking about this stuff, talking about taking the stress out and putting the human in. Talking about redefining what success looks like. I'm in London quite a lot in different organisations, but I am very open to having these kind of conversations with people, because I think the more that people like you and I can connect, that's bringing consciousness up, and that's bringing energy up, and that's going to help the human race overall, as dramatic as that sounds. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, then please message me through watching this, and let's have a chat about how we can help and how we can increase the awareness of this kind of stuff.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you for having me.